Maine, like most of the country, doesn't have enough housing. It's been estimated that the state needs another 23,000 housing units, but it hasn't always been this way. A century ago, despite the rapidly growing population in the early 20th century, homelessness wasn't common. The reason? People lived together, sharing homes and apartments. Today, people live apart. A century ago, homeowners might have a dozen members of their family living in one house, and there were lots of boarding houses and single residency rooming houses for those without family. Can that be brought back? Maine has the oldest average age in the country, and many older people have houses with extra rooms. It's been estimated that if most of them were rented out, the housing shortage would disappear. But they don't rent them out. Why? Well, let's consider an average homeowner. She discovers that she could really use some extra income. Renting a room would be just the thing to provide that income. But watch out! Maine law gives a room renter full rights as a tenant. To get a room renter to leave requires a full eviction process and a court order. It can take as long as 6 months to a year. That can be a harrowing 6 months for a homeowner living under the same roof with a dirty, dangerous, or disruptive room renter. It's no surprise that room renting is uncommon in the state. But the state recently decided to try to change that. In 2023, led by State Representative Maggie O'Neill of Saco, the legislature passed a bill, LD 709, instructing the Maine Housing Authority to set up a program to encourage room rentals. LD 709 was specifically aimed at encouraging older homeowners to rent rooms. But it did nothing to reduce the risks involved. It did nothing to change the law giving room renters the right to remain in someone else's home for months, no matter how badly they behave. Why focus on older homeowners without reforming the law? It might have been due to a flood of publicity being given at the time to a program taking place in Boston.
Well, are you an empty nester with some extra space in your house, or a young professional looking for a more affordable place to live in Boston? Enter Nesterly, an app designed to connect.
Nesterly would rent out rooms from houses of empty nesters, older people in Louisville that don't want to leave their homes but no longer need all that space. So what does that look like? Well, first,
across the country are struggling with a shortage of housing, but there are millions of spare bedrooms. As Stephanie Lydon from PBS station WGBH explains, Boston has become a launching pad for a new technology that connects people looking for affordable rent with homeowners who have space to spare.
The home sharing idea came to Nesterly founder Noelle Marcus while she was living in Boston.
Started by former MIT students, Nesterly's founder and primary spokesperson is Noelle Marcus. Nesterly offers a website on which homeowners and potential renters can connect, but it does a lot more. It subjects both homeowner and renter to extensive background checks, including a criminal history search, a check of sex offender registries, social security number verification, a check to see if they're on the terrorist watch list, and a search of every single former address they've ever had. Social workers are brought in to instruct the homeowner and the renter on how to get along, and the social workers call every month to, quote, check in. Finally, the parties aren't even allowed to collect and pay rent themselves. Rent has to go to Nesterly first, which takes out a commission and then passes it on to the homeowner. This is an oddly heavy-handed approach which seemingly would turn prospective customers away. There are many online companies that match property owners and renters without imposing themselves on the client's privacy and dignity like this one does. It would be hard if Nesterly tried to compete in the open market with all the less intrusive companies, but it doesn't. Nesterly does not depend on competing for customers to survive. Nesterly depends instead on government subsidies, that is, taxpayer money. They do not offer their services in any area in which the local government hasn't handed over taxpayer dollars. So why would tax money go to something like this? That's where the focus on the elderly comes in. Although Nesterly is a profit-making enterprise, it presents itself almost as if it were a charity. Through its personable chief executive, Noel Marcus, it says it's trying to solve two of society's problems. On the one hand, the loneliness, isolation, and financial hardship of the elderly, and on the other, the housing crunch, especially for younger people.
So before I founded Nesterly, I saw three big trends that were happening with my parents and their peers. One is that it's becoming more expensive for people to stay in their homes as they get older. Rising property taxes, increasing home maintenance costs, and also just general rising costs of living. Two is that some household chores are not as easy to do or as enjoyable as they maybe used to be, like changing a light bulb and getting on a ladder, or shoveling snow, or maybe learning a new technology. And then finally, generations are more disconnected than they've ever been. So that's why I started Nesterly, to connect households who have extra space with young people who can help around the house in exchange for lower rent.
This message has been like catnip for the media. Noel Marcus and Nesterly have been a frequent presence on television talk shows, television news programs, and have been written about in innumerable publications, including the most prominent in the country, such as the New York Times, The Economist, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, Forbes magazine, and The Atlantic. Did members of the Maine legislature see some of this publicity and design LD 709 with Nesterly specifically in mind? Intentionally or not, in passing LD 709, the legislature set up a program in such a way that there weren't many other organizations that could fulfill it. And when, in fact, the Maine Housing Authority sought bids for the program, it drew only one bidder. That was, of course, Nesterly. The Maine Housing Authority signed a contract with Nesterly in 2024, giving the company $199,870 paid out over the year. It signed a second contract with Nesterly in 2025, giving the company an additional $85,000 to continue whatever they were doing until February 2026. And what exactly was Nesterly doing for the money? Apparently nothing more than expanding their existing website just enough to allow people in Maine to sign up. Local senior citizens groups were expected to volunteer to spread the word, thus saving Nesterly the expense of having to advertise or pay anyone local to promote their services. Did this approach work? According to Eric Jorgensen, a spokesperson for Maine Housing, in 25 months, Nesterly got 320 people to apply, but in the end placed only 11 renters in houses. Do the arithmetic, and it showed that the state of Maine paid nearly $26,000 for each room renter placed in a home. In other words, what it cost for each room renter was an amount that could have paid rent in a luxury condominium for a year instead of just buying a connection to a small room in someone else's house that they would have to pay for themselves. Jorgensen says that Nesterly's aggressive background checks were a necessary feature to limit the state's liability, but that Maine Housing now realizes that the program didn't work out. In an email, Jorgensen wrote, quote, "If we were starting from scratch knowing what we know now, I think the better approach would be to focus it on local communities with specific infrastructure, age-friendly community committees, etc., who would market it locally. In the meantime, the corporation Nesterly Inc. was having troubles but didn't tell anyone in Maine. Its corporate charter was voided in the state of Delaware, where it was registered and where its charter was based. Legally, that means the corporation, Nesterly Inc., has ceased to exist. Over the 7 years since their founding in 2017, they had failed to pay any of the fees owed to Delaware. When that state finally took action to void Nesterly Inc. on March 1, 2024, the now-defunct corporation owed the state of Delaware $137,068.23. Despite having lost her corporate status for over a year, Nesterly chairperson Noel Marcus went ahead with signing the contract extension in April 2025 under the corporate name Nesterly Inc. This is actually a misrepresentation that violates Maine law, but it is unclear at this point whether the state will take any action such as trying to recover some of the funds. It could press charges. With the loss of both its government money and its corporate structure, meaning its whole financial structure is invalid, Nesterly still has a handful of customers in Maine. These are now vulnerable since Nesterly required them to hand over access to their bank accounts for rent payments. One person who signed up with Nesterly messaged Today River Valley saying, "I will say I was surprised at the fees they charged. There's an initial fee of just under $200, and then there is another monthly fee for the processing of payments that is around $15. They don't do ACH transfers, so I had to set up with a debit card on file with their website, and they automatically pull the monthly payments from that." Nesterly may soon be gone from the state of Maine, but the challenge persists. How to make some of the many empty bedrooms available to Mainers who need housing. There are ways. One is to change the law, making room renters full tenants with the right to stay put until the property owner gets a court-ordered eviction. Evictions in Maine take anywhere from a few months to a year, and a property owner unfamiliar with the law will have a $1,000 legal bill paying a lawyer to go through the legal technicalities required. For a homeowner renting a room in his own personal space, it can be dangerous to wait the months needed to remove a room renter who has proved dangerous, dirty, or disruptive. Fortunately, there is a way to fix the law. It would be to copy a statute that's on the books in California. That statute is devoted specifically to room renters, which it refers to as lodgers. Under the California law, a homeowner can remove a bad room renter with a notice that's only as long as the rental term. That is, if the renter pays weekly, the owner can give 7 days' notice. After the notice period is over, no more legal delays are allowed. If the room renter hasn't left, they are trespassing and can be removed by police. If homeowners in Maine knew they had this extra margin of safety in renting extra bedrooms, the numbers of rooms available would increase without invading anybody's privacy or forcing them to hand over financial information to a defunct out-of-state corporation. And there is another incentive that could be used. Maine could exempt room rental income from the state income tax so that even hesitant homeowners might be coaxed into taking in a lodger. The legislature worries about the fiscal impact of bills and hates to see any loss of tax revenue, but since most of the rooms in question have never been rented before, it would not be a loss of existing revenue, just a willingness to forego potential new revenue. And it is very possible that the loss would be less than the $285,000 that the state spent paying a defunct corporation to use its intrusive and ultimately ineffective methods.